one who says hello. Hello, Neve, and hello to all of you. Welcome to my living room. This is the one singular part of my apartment that looks presentable enough to film, so we're happy to have you here. Okay, so I want to preface this entire video by saying I am one blind person, and this is simply my experience and my opinion. This is not the opinion of all blind people. This does not represent all blind people, as always. I am just here to bring you Molly Burke's perspective on the guide dog versus the cane, two mobility devices that those in the blind community may choose to use. Okay, I might as well tell you like my past from cane to guide dog and where I'm at now. So I started taking O&M lessons, or orientation and mobility lessons, when I was, I want to say 7 or 8 years old. And I was learning to use the cane, but I only needed to use it at night when I was night blind. But I could see enough during the day to not use it, or so we thought, until I was 9 years old and I had a major blind girl accident, and people were like, yo, Molly needs to use the cane all the time for sure now. Basically, it was because I've never had depth perception. If you've seen my really old, like what I really see video, then you kind of have heard me explain that, but I've never had depth perception. So basically, even though I could see, I couldn't see when there was stairs or something like that. The world just looked flat. It looked like I don't know, because I've never been able to see a 3D movie because I've never been able to see depth, so I've never been able to see 3D. But I feel like it's maybe if you went to a 3D movie but didn't wear the glasses, perhaps that's what it's like. But yeah, so I couldn't see depth of where things were, so I ran into something, yada, yada, yada. So anyways, at 9 years old, I started using a cane full-time, all day and at night. And then at that point, I heard that it was possible to get a guide dog as young as 13 from the Mira Foundation in Quebec, where you guys know, if you followed me for a long time, I've gotten my last 2 guide dogs, Gypsy and Gallop. And so I was determined at that time that I was going to nail my O&M skills, which includes, you know, navigating with a cane, but it also includes the auditory listening skills, directional skills, all of these things combined to make O&M. Which I will be doing an O&M video. I'm just working right now on finding an O&M instructor who's like comfortable being on camera, but it will be coming in the next few months. So if you're not already, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notifications bell so that you can be up to date when that video does come out. Lavender, can you stop making a ruckus? So I'm working on that, will be coming soon. Also, since I'm in the shout out mood, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/MollyBurke. It is my private fan club where I get to connect with you guys on a deeper level. You get private live streams, sneak peeks of merch collections, behind the scenes photos that don't get released publicly. And I actually recently shared a very exciting guide dog related update over there. So if you want to find out about that, head over to my Patreon. Yeah, so then I was really determined to just work incredibly hard. And this is what I tell anybody who doesn't want to use a cane, but really wants to get a guide dog. Sorry, honey, any reputable guide dog school will not be giving you a guide dog unless you have very good skills with your cane. So what is worth doing is just dedicating yourself to working very hard in your O&M lessons, nailing your cane skills, and then you can get a guide dog sooner because you'll have really good skills. So yeah, that's what I did. I just dedicated myself to getting as strong as I could to get a guide dog, because particularly if you want to get a guide dog at a young age, they're tougher on you. Like Mira is really hard to get into when you're a kid because it's a big responsibility to give a young person a dog. And so it's not an easy school to get into. Now my guide dog is moving around. It's a hot mess up in here. Welcome to Molly Burke's life. So yes, that's what I would recommend. So that's what I did. And at the time, the youngest that Mira gave dogs out was 13. Now Mira gives dogs out as young as 11. So pretty amazing, very exciting. And yeah, so at 13, I was in fact approved, actually just after my 13th birthday. Literally, my birthday was February 8th. I turned 13. This was 2007. And March, my March break or spring break that year, I went to go do my mirror test where they tested my O&M skills. And if you want to learn more about that, you can read my audiobook, It's Not What It Looks Like by Molly Burke, because I go more into depth about that experience in the book. But yeah, so I ended up being approved at the end of my assessment, and that July of 2007, I went back and I got my first guide dog, Gypsy. Boom, isn't she adorable? She was so cute. Oh, she was like so perfectly contoured. The natural contour, she had it on point. So yeah, I got my guide dog and I used her for just under 7 years. 7 years would have been July, but she passed away in late May 22nd, 2014, and that was an unexpected death. If you want to learn about that, you can go to the video where I talk about that. It's very sad. And then August of 2014, I got my guide dog Gallop, who we all know and love. And so in that span of about 2.5 months where I did not have Gypsy and I had not gotten Gallop yet, I went a good 2 weeks. Like,
speaking of that cup of tea you're waiting for in your Gallop mug.
Isn't this mug so cute? It like literally looks like my guide dog Gallop. I'm obsessed. And isn't Mama B the best for making me tea? Thanks, Mommy. I'm gonna put this down before I spill. So, in that 2.5 months, the first like 2 weeks, I basically refused to leave my house. And if I did, I refused to use a cane. It was just like, I just wasn't ready for it. It wasn't what I expected to be facing at that time. So I was just grieving, and I was already in a really bad place. I had just been diagnosed with PTSD and generalized anxiety. It was a whole hot mess in my life at that time. Then after about 2 weeks, I slowly started picking up my cane again and using my cane. And I remember feeling very frustrated because it was just so different to what I was used to. And so by the time I got, and I don't want to get into like why that is, because I'm going to go through the pros and cons list of each from my perspective after I've gotten through this story time section. But I was so happy to get a guide dog again, and it was really, really hard. I almost left without him. You can hear that story. I've told that story before too. I'm so glad I didn't, and I've had him for 6.5 years now, and he's been an absolute incredible best friend. Woo! Where was that? That was my cane.
Oh, and it hit your water. Okay.
Oh, it's wet now. Okay, we'll bring you into this later. Your time is coming. And so yeah, Gallop's been great, and as you guys know, if you follow my journey over the past few months, I've been talking about Gallop's retirement coming and blah, blah, blah. And that means I am now slowly transitioning to being a cane user again. In fact, I had my first orientation and mobility lesson in my new neighborhood last week, and that was with my cane. And I have not had an orientation and mobility lesson with a cane since I was 13 years old. And I'm 27. So it has been a long time since I had a orientation and mobility lesson with my cane. I have to say that for me personally, when I had my lesson with my cane the other day, it was a very stark reminder of why I will always be a guide dog user. I think it's really important to recognize in the blind community that there's no right or wrong answer. The cane doesn't suit everybody, and the guide dog doesn't suit everybody. Some people, like I have friends who are blind, who are middle-aged, and like they've never had a guide dog, they've never wanted a guide dog, they will always use a cane. And I have people in my life like myself who will get guide dog after guide dog and like dread having to use the cane between each dog because they're just guide dog users. And then there's like the middle ground where there's people, you know, they'll get a guide dog, they'll use it until it retires, then they'll use a cane for 5 years, then they'll decide to get a guide dog again, and they're going based off of, you know, what chapter in life they're in. I respect that. There is, as I said, no right or wrong answer. And why I wanted to make this video and share my personal perspective on this is for my blind peeps out there who might watch this and who are considering one or the other or aren't sure what the pros and cons are because they've only used a cane, or to my sighted viewers to just educate you on why some blind people might choose to remain cane users, and why some of us really do require guide dogs, and why guide dogs are so important, and why guide dog schools like the Mirror Foundation need so much funding, because these dogs are invaluable to some of us who feel that way. So without further ado, because typical Molly style, she has rambled for far too long. Let's start with the Pros of a cane. See, I told you your moment was coming. This is one of my 2 canes. This is the classic red and white one, and you'll notice that it looks rather untouched and clean, like barely used, and that's because it's barely been used. This has sat in my closet for years, untouched.
What's her name? Did you name it?
No.
No name on the cane?
No, I have never named a cane, Eve.
That would be nice. That would make you feel like it's a friend.
You're right. Help me name my cane down below. And then I have a hot pink one, which is much more battered. She is...
Do you want to show her?
Do you have her?
She needs a name too.
I feel Fiona for her.
I don't know.
No?
I like the name Fiona. I don't know.
Doesn't resonate?
No.
Okay. Sort of Fiona's out there watching who got excited. So this is my pink cane. She is definitely more battered, but obviously still not super battered. By the way, for any of you out there who are interested in getting a colored cane, I got this one probably 8 years ago on Ambutech. If they're still around, I'll link them down below. I don't know because I haven't bought a cane in years, so if they're still around, I'll link them. They do custom canes. They do a whole bunch of different colors, and of course, I got hot pink. I will say the con of a hot pink cane is it's not as recognized as a red and white cane. This is kind of more of like a fun thing, like if it matches your outfit going out on a hot date or something like that, but this is the more kind of like universally recognized symbol of like, this person is blind, not just playing with a hot pink stick. Those are my canes. I'm gonna put you down, Fiona. She's Fiona till we find a better name. I'm sorry, Neve. Yes, so this is my cane. And I do see many pros to this. Okay, also, I will mention, these are like the utmost basic version of a cane. And I realized in my O&M lesson that I desperately need to like experiment with other cane options. This is very heavy. Will get me into one of my cons, but this is very heavy and this tip isn't great. So I am curious to try a rolly tip, and I'm also curious to try one of the lighter weight material options. So if you're a cane user and you have any recommendations, because I know there's a couple different materials for like a good lightweight option, and if you think the rolly tips are good, let me know, because literally all I've ever used. So yeah, let me know about the rolly tip. I used a pencil tip like once upon a time as my first cane, I feel like, when I was like 7. But ever since then, I've always just had the standard marshmallow tip. Also, just a note, please sanitize your canes. They touch a lot of gross stuff. You never know. I've definitely stuck my cane in poop. Absolutely. That hot pink cane came to Kenya with me and it absolutely got stuck in cow poop. But any suggestions, because I'm done with this like OG cane. I really need like a newfangled updated version with better materials. So let me know, give me your feedback. But okay, so pros of the cane. It is universally recognized, particularly that red and white one, right? Like people see it and they know I'm blind. And to be honest, that's really nice sometimes, because that is not something I ever experienced with a guide dog, frankly. Because there are so many service dogs for so many different reasons now, and because there's so many fake service dogs, and because I don't fit the stereotype society has about disability, people never, ever look at me with Gallop and are like, that's a blind woman. And so the cane does have that effect. People see me and they're like, she's probably blind. Because nobody else just has a red and white cane that they wave around in front of them. They're not blind. So that is something that I think is a strong pro for a cane. It is recognizable. The second pro I would say for the cane is, along that track, people move out of your way. When people see it, they generally move out of your way, although you would be shocked. I feel like there is still a good strong 20% of the time when people don't and I hit them. And I will just say to the sight of people watching, if somebody with a cane hits you, that's on you, girl. That is on you. You absolutely should have been the one to move out of the way, because I can't see you. So I am not getting out of your way. And if you're silently standing there, there's nothing I can do. That's the job of my cane, is to contact the object and help me get around it. So yeah, I will say, like, more often though with a cane, people do get out of my way. With the guide dog, they don't. People just remain in the way because again, they don't recognize it as me being blind and not seeing. So they just expect me to go around them, which the guide dog will get around you. So it's fine, but it's still helpful for me and the guide dog for you to get out of the way. So I do like that with the cane, people do actually get out of the way. And I guess because it is more recognizable as like a symbol of blindness, I will say I'm also like offered the help that I need more often when I have a cane versus the guide dog. Because again, people don't see me as being disabled with the guide dog. So I have to advocate and verbalize what I need way more when I have my guide dog than when I have the cane, and people are more willing to come up and help me or offer assistance if they see that I might be struggling with something. So depending on your preference of receiving help from strangers, that could be a pro or it could be a con. And then my final pro, I'm sorry, I don't have a ton of pros for canes, again, because this is all just my personal preference. I'm a tried and true Holy Grail guide dog user, so I don't have a ton of pros for canes. But my final pro for a cane is that, I mean, it does fold up. Like it's not like a guide dog where you get to a restaurant and you have to like find space for this giant dog to be able to sit discreetly or like fit under a table or a chair. Like I do think it's nice that you can just like fold it up and throw it in your handbag. You don't have to think about it. Or when it's a rainy or snowy day out and you go inside a restaurant, you don't have like this wet dog to dry down. So that's definitely a big pro for canes. And I really think that at the end of the day, if you are blind and you're trying to decide if a guide dog or a cane is best for you, what you really need to look at is the pros and cons for you in your life. Because for me, the guide dog pros outweigh the guide dog cons. And so guide dog is worth it for me. But as I said, that's not the case for everybody. Like the things that I put in the cons list are things that I know a lot of my cane user friends complain about when they talk about the idea of having a guide dog. So that's what you really need to consider is like what pros outweigh what cons. Heading to cane cons. Cane cons. Hashtag cane cons. It gets stuck in cracks. And that's annoying. That's why I really want to try one of the rolly tips, because like if you're walking on like cobblestone streets or like interlocking brick sidewalks or anything like that, it's just like dun, 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 dun. It's just getting stuck in everything, and that is so annoying. Or like you go onto sand or you go onto pebbles or it's just like grass. You have to keep changing the technique of how you use it because it's getting stuck in things, and I personally find that very frustrating. I literally had a scar just under my belly button, because you hold a cane like right around that height, of when I was at summer camp for the blind, and I was walking along the dock, the wooden slats, with my cane, and it got stuck between two of the wooden slats, but I was walking too fast and the cane jutted into my stomach, and I was at summer camp, so I was in a bikini because I was like on the dock at the water, and it skinned my stomach. The like elastic band at the top of the cane skinned my stomach, and I had like a scar under my belly button from that. And I know all my cane using friends get me on that. Like we've all been hit in the stomach by our own cane at least once in life, and that's annoying. That doesn't happen with guide dogs. So definitely a con in my opinion. The next con is definitely like, again, this is why I want to try to find like a lightweight option. I find it really heavy, and like I know that I haven't been using a cane for years full time, and so my body just isn't used to the motion. But like my wrist, by the end of a 45-minute O&M lesson, I was like, okay, she's tender. Like I'm just not used to this like motion, and I don't know if I need to change my arm technique or what. But I was like, wow, that hurts my wrist. And I remember when I was a full-time cane user, that didn't happen. So obviously it's different. Like it's just because I'm getting back into using it, but the wrist pain is real. So the next con, in my, like again, my personal opinion, I don't feel as safe. As a petite blind woman living in a big city, I like the safety and security of having a big dog with me, because I don't feel as vulnerable. I don't feel as lonely. I don't feel as at risk. I feel like where my cane makes me a target perhaps, because people see me and immediately identify me as being more vulnerable, my guide dog stops me from being at risk, because people are gonna look and be like, wow, that's a 95-pound dog that I don't wanna get bit by. And so for me, frankly, like if I could boil it down to like top 2 reasons I prefer being a guide dog user, safety. And I know that's huge, particularly for a lot of my fellow blind female friends. Like, I know a lot of my blind girlfriends say the same thing around the safety feeling. And I'm sure a lot of blind men feel the same, but I'm just coming from like a female perspective, having heard the same thing echoed from other female friends in the blind community. I do not feel as safe with my cane. In saying that, I would not feel comfortable going out at night alone with my cane. If the sun goes down, I'm not going out alone with my cane. If the sun goes down, I would go out alone with my guide dog. So that's a huge difference for me in my quality of life on a daily basis. Another con for me is the fact that like with a cane, I just feel like I move so much slower because to navigate, and this comes down to also where deciding between a cane or a guide dog also comes down to what your skill set is. Like, what is your strength as a skill? Is your strength your auditory skills, or is your bigger strength your tactile skills? Because a guide dog is something that requires more auditory skills, in my opinion, and a cane is something that requires more tactile skills, because that's what you're getting from a cane. You're getting tactile feedback. So if you heavily rely on the tactile feedback and that's how you feel comfortable navigating the world, you honestly probably wouldn't like a guide dog because you really don't get tactile feedback from a guide dog. You skip over all of that. And so if that's the way you choose to navigate, I don't suggest getting a guide dog, or I suggest seeing if you can, you know, go, I don't know what other schools offer. I just know what my school does, Mira. But like if you can go and have like a test run, if the guide dog school you want to go to does like an open house, and you can kind of like have an experience, or some guide dog schools do like summer camps. So if you can have that experience of working a guide dog without committing to getting a guide dog, I think that's a really good option, particularly for people who tend to navigate more so through tactility. And so I was always auditory. Like that's my strength, which is definitely part of why I've always preferred guide dogs. That's my strong suit. So I will say that I think for me, I find it frustrating that with a cane, I contact an object, say a garbage can, and then I have to find my way around the garbage can. Whereas my guide dog sees the garbage can, guides me around the garbage can, and I never even had to know there was an object in my way. I find that to be a smoother, faster, more efficient way of navigating. So to me, like, that is a con for canes. Just how slow it makes me feel like I navigate the world. So now let's get to my favorite subject. My furry friends, my guide dogs. Again, a lot of like what were cons for canes will now be flipped to be pros for guide dogs and vice versa. But for me, a huge pro for the guide dogs, I won't harp on it because I already did, but it's just the safety. I just feel so much safer, particularly doing things like getting into the back of an Uber or a Lyft alone. I feel so safe with my guide dog in a way that I would not feel as safe as a cane user personally. So I would say within that top 2 of why I love being a guide dog user and why I will always remain a guide dog user, unless something like significant shifts in my life, is the comfort, like just having a friend. Like, it's more than just a tool, right? My cane is simply a tool. My guide dog is so much more than a tool. My guide dog is my tool, but also my best friend, my little child. I never feel lonely. Like, when I was a bullied teenager in school, if I had to sit and eat lunch alone, I wasn't actually alone because I had Gypsy there with me, and that's really special. So that was really big for me. And just the social aspect. I'm an extrovert. I love people. And so for me, meeting new people is really, really important. But when you can't see the people around you to approach and to meet, it can be tricky. It can be more difficult to make connections. I just find with my guide dogs, people are like happy and excited to approach me and start conversations, and they feel comfortable. They feel like it's like a comfortable way to start a conversation. Nobody's gonna walk up to you. I don't know, maybe this has happened to you, blind peeps with canes, let me know. But in my experience, when I use a cane, I've never had somebody approach me and be like, oh, how old's your cane? How long have you had it? But with a guide dog, it's like a really comfortable way to start a conversation. So many people love dogs, it's very connective. So people are more likely to come up to me and be like, hey, nice to meet you, your dog's so beautiful, like what's its name, how long have you had it? And it's an easy way for them to start a conversation with me, but it's also an easy way for me to broach the topic of my disability in a way that feels safe and comfortable and not so abrupt or scary for the able-bodied person who's maybe never experienced blindness or doesn't know anybody with a disability. So I personally really like that. And of course, speed. I talked about that a con for the cane for me personally was, I keep saying personally, I feel like I'm just really trying to drive the point home that this is just Molly Burke's perspective. I feel like, just like I said, a con is how slow I feel with a cane. A big pro for me with the guide dog is how fast I feel. I feel like I can just like take on the world and like walk full speed ahead and there's nothing in my way, and if there is, the dog will just, boom, circle right around it. And I love that. I feel like it gives me more freedom. In many ways. I feel like mentally it gives me more freedom to stop focusing on like what I'm feeling with my cane. I have this freedom to enjoy conversation with somebody while I walk or check a text message while I walk. I'm not so much like, what am I feeling? What is this? Is this where I turn? Is that the slant in the sidewalk? What crack does that mean? Like, I'm not so focused on every little thing my cane is feeling. I'm focused on just walking and enjoying life, and that feels really good. So between how safe I feel, having that constant like friend in my life and how social I feel it allows me to be, the speed that I feel I get, all in all allows me to feel more confidently independent. I do feel like there's more I am willing to do on my own when I have a guide dog by my side. I feel more tied down and that I need more help when I'm using a cane. And the cons for a guide dog. You constantly have a toddler attached to your hip. That's the reality. Just like I say how important it is for me to have like that friend always with me, for a lot of people, that's a huge con. For a lot of people, they don't want to have something they have to constantly take care of on top of themselves, their household, their job, their spouse, their kids, their friends, their family, all the other things that you're juggling in life. They don't want another thing. And I think a lot of people who don't want pets would feel that way, right? Like there's some of us who are like, yes, pets are tons of work, but they're so worth it. And there's lots of people who are like, I don't want pets. Like, I don't want to be tied down like that. And so a lot of people feel that way about a guide dog too. They don't want to have this thing that they constantly need to think about and care for. When I go away on trips, so funny to even say that, like I've traveled in the last year. But typically when I would travel, I had to not only think about my needs, but I had to think about Gypsy or Gallop's needs. That means packing all of their kibble, poop bags, toys, water and food bowls. I would pack all of their medicines in case they got an ear infection or in case XYZ happened, so that I was prepared for every possible occasion. They took up half my suitcase was dog stuff, and that's something that a lot of people just don't want to deal with. And then if you are somebody who travels a lot for work like I did, you're constantly thinking, okay, is this country I'm going to, am I able to take my guide dog there? How long is the flight? Does the flight have layovers? Will the layover have a doggy relief area? What shots do I need to get my dog to get into that country, and how far ahead of time do I need to get the dog those shots and fill out what paperwork? There's so much that goes into traveling with a guide dog, and if you travel frequently, that might be something you just don't want to have to deal with, and I totally get it because it's definitely not easy. But again, for me, the pros outweigh these cons, but I understand why for other people these cons would not outweigh it, especially if you are somebody who prefers to navigate the world tactilely over auditorily. So yeah, that's definitely something. And then the expense. You know, canes are not expensive. Guide dogs, very expensive. Thankfully, most people get guide dogs through charities where it's entirely funded. These dogs cost anywhere, depending on the guide dog school, from $20,000 to $60,000 per dog. The Mira Foundation is currently sitting at $40,000 per dog. And we get the dogs for free, but also most guide dog schools don't cover funding after that. Some do, so you know, you can do your research, but most guide dog schools don't cover vet bills, food, all of those expenses. So that is something that you will have to think for the lifetime of that dog. Can you afford financially to support that dog and its health and well-being? Of course, you have to pick up poop. If you're a germaphobe, that might be something that you just don't want to do. Another one is the social aspect. I can see why for some people the social aspect of it actually is a con. And I will admit at times for me it does feel like a con. Like at times I'm like, okay, great, I'm just trying to order my coffee and go because I'm busy and I don't want to stand and talk about your dog for 20 minutes because my dog reminds you of your dog. And that definitely happens a lot. So there are times when I feel like that's a con. I know, like, I have blind friends who are like, I literally ask them for the ugliest dog or like the scariest looking dog, so nobody wants to pet my dog or talk to me about my dog. It can be frustrating for people. Another one is that you're constantly training the dog. It's not like this thing that comes perfect and stays perfect. It's a dog and it requires constant practice and training. And that is why so many people have had to retire their guide dogs, like myself, since COVID, because our dogs have not been getting that training, have not been getting that practice. And so it is something where you're constantly having to work your dog and challenge your dog, retrain your dog, correct your dog, and that's a commitment. Some people don't want to have to think about that when they're trying to get to work. And when you have a guide dog, you have to think about that. Those were all the pros and cons for canes versus guide dogs that I could think of. So I'm just sitting here in my onesie watching the edit to give my editor notes, and I was like, how is this video about to end? And I did not mention cons being access issues. Like, I'm sorry, Molly. What were you on filming this video? Access issues. Hello, obviously I get denied access like maybe once a week because of having a guide dog, whether it be from restaurants, hotels, shopping malls, Ubers, Lyfts, taxis, airplanes, anywhere. So, well, airplanes doesn't really happen that much. That only happened once, but yeah. Access issues. If you don't want to get denied access, don't get a guide dog. Please, if you are a fellow blind person who uses canes and or guide dogs, comment below and let me know if I missed any or if there's something that in your experience or from your perspective you want to share. Let's have a fun conversation down below. If you would like another guide dog related video, then again, hit that subscribe button because I have one coming out very, very soon that I'm excited to share with you guys. Don't forget to hit those notification bells. Join my Patreon, link down below if you are interested. And you can click up here to learn about what it's like to move to a new house when you're blind. And click over here if you would like a fashion related video. Okay, bye.